Yes, lads, what's going on? And welcome to Season 3, Episode 24 of The Running Irishman. In this episode, we have a really exciting one lined up for you all. We have Chris and Adam from Bearmile Media. Chris and Adam have their own podcast called the Bearmile Podcast. They also have their own Instagram and their own clothing brand, the Bearmile, which they actually bought into a couple of years ago. We find out how they started up in the origins of the Bearmile, the Bearmile Media Group, and what they do and how they want to turn it into a full-time occupation, you could say. We also talk about, the Bearmile itself, as Chris just recently ran a 4:59, I'm pretty sure, in the Chunder Bearmile. We talk about the rules, and we get both of the guys' perspective on the Bearmile itself, the race, how they feel, and how, their experience in it, and because Chris has actually ran on a international and world class level in the beer mile. And Adam gives us his thoughts on the beer mile as well. The lads are really sound. We have a really good chat and a good laugh. We throw in a few spicy questions there, so you want to make sure you're listening out for those. Also, I did live stream this episode of the podcast over on the Run Irishman twitch.tv/The Run Irishman 1, where you can come along, watch the episode live, watch it before it goes out, interact with me and the guests. So make sure to tune in over there. I do put out the notification on the Run Irishman official Instagram before I go live over there, so make sure to give me a follow over there, and all the lads' socials for the Beer Mile media, podcast, Instagram, and also for their swag, as they like to call it, are all down in the description below, so make sure to check that out. Without further ado, let's get into this episode of the podcast with Chris and Adam from the Beer Mile podcast. So roll the intro. Yes, lads, what is going on?
My name is Amy O'Donoghue.
People call me Dr. Josh.
My name's Lewis O'Loughlin.
My name is Isolde O'Donnell.
I'm Charlie O'Donovan.
I'm Abdul Jill.
I'm Scott Fagan.
I'm Mark Conrad.
My name's Cormac Dalton.
I'm Paul Byrne.
I'm Michael Morgan.
Fourth and runner.
The Irish Hammer.
My name's Brennan. I'm Brian Fay.
It's Dash Bar.
I am a triathlete.
Craig Engels, Cheryl Nolan, Sean Donoghue,
John Rankin.
We got 10th at the World Championships in 2019 in Doha.
I'm doing great, just happy to be on the podcast.
I'm a Man United fan.
Let's get into this episode of the podcast. Yes, lads, so we are here with Chris and Adam from the Beer Mile podcast. Lads, I really appreciate you taking the time to come onto the podcast, and I'm really looking forward to having a chat with you.
Likewise, we really appreciate being on, and excited to chat with you and get to know you as well.
Perfect. Just for maybe people listening at home, would we be able to, before we jump in, get a kind of name to each of your voices, and also just a little bit about yourselves for a little bit of an introduction. So whoever wants, you can take it away.
You get to go first. Okay, I'll go first. What's up, everybody? This is Chris. I guess Robertson's my last name if you're curious. I'm a lot of people say the cooler host of the Beer Mile podcast.
Easily.
So I am, I guess my distinction from Adam, or my claim to fame, I guess you could say, my gimmick is that I run the Beer Mile, and
you run it fast.
Yeah, I guess we both run the Beer Mile. I run it a little bit faster than Adam. That's the main difference between us, I'd say.
Yeah. And for the audio only, I guess, listeners, I'm Adam. My claim to fame is more like on the creative, technical side of the Beer Mile podcast. Chris and I have been working together at like random jobs since I graduated a while ago, and now just doing Beer Mile podcasts and doing whatever that is, I guess.
I'll give you that. You do definitely bring some good meme content, some good creative ideas to the podcast, and Adam's also the developer for us for the Bearmile.com website, which we're going to be releasing a new version of that in the next week or two, depending on when this podcast drops. So Adam's also the engineer, developer guy that's been doing all that work too.
Technology slave.
Yeah, technology guy.
Cool. So we kind of have, a good balance of Chris kind of more on the known for the running side, but then Adam obviously kind of carries the media side as well in a bit. So it really does balance out, which is always good.
Chris, Chris kind of sells himself too short though, because he does all the video editing too.
Yeah, Adam's got a lot of the ideas that you see, but I'll do the editing pieces of it and some of the filming stuff. But I think we have a really good balance. We split it well between Adam owning the website, me kind of being responsible for editing all the videos and the podcast and that sort of stuff. So yeah, we got a good balance going.
Definitely, and it's definitely it's obviously shown then in your own podcast, which we'll get into now further down the line of this episode. You can kind of see, you kind of just bounce off each other. It just seems like a normal conversation, that there isn't a camera or a microphone in front of you. So it's as I said, we'll get more into that later on in the episode. But it definitely translates then into the podcast, which is really, really good to see. Kind of taking it back a bit, he's kind of touched on it there in terms of how you two met and the kind of the Bearmile podcast kind of came to life. So do you want to take us back to when you both met?
Yeah, I can give that one a go. So Adam and I both went to the same university in the state of Iowa in the U.S. I'm assuming most of these listeners are from Ireland, so we went to the same university, but not at the same time. So I graduated from university right before Adam started there, but I knew Adam's now fiance. I knew her during my time there, and so we kind of and had mutual friends as well. So we kind of knew of each other, and eventually were formally introduced. And then really, I guess the way that we met was as Adam was graduating from university. I was working for a company and was able to refer him in and help him get a job at that company. And so then we started essentially working. Well, I guess we didn't really work together because it was such a big company, but we worked for the same company. So got to know each other there, both lived in Chicago, lived pretty close together, and got to know each other a lot more over the years. So I guess that's kind of really ended up meeting through work, technically, I guess. But then this past year, working from home, and still Adam and I work for the same company, but now a different one.
The third company.
The third company that we've worked at, that's the same. So Adam has followed me to my last 3 jobs. Working from home with the pandemic going on, we kind of decided that it was what we both have always kind of wanted to have a podcast. We thought that'd be cool. And then the opportunity came up to buy Bearmile.com from the previous owner, to buy the domain. And so we basically just jumped at the opportunity, took advantage of it, and said now's a good time to do it because we're at least working from home. Adam moved he lives in the same condo building as me, so he just lives a few floors above me. So it seemed like the right time to be able to work on this together. And of course, instead of just saying, let's just work on the website or just work on the podcast, we're like, let's do it all. Let's do it all at the same time.
We got time.
Time. So we bought the website, started the podcast, started the YouTube channel, got on the Instagram game, basically just started it all at the same time and went all in on it. And it's been really fun. It's been a lot of, we expected it to be a lot of work though.
Yeah.
That was known coming in, but it's been a lot of work, balancing all the different pieces of it. But super glad we did it, and it feels like it's been way longer than I don't even know, like 8 months or something. Yeah. It's only been 8 months of doing it, but I feel like we've established ourselves pretty well at this point.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say that, like, you've had some, pretty high-profile names on the podcast so far, which is obviously really, really good to see. And again, like, branching out with the merch and a lot more, like the Instagram page as well. It's really, really been going well for you. So yeah, you mentioned there that you always wanted to start the podcast, but did you kind of have the idea that it would get to where it was now, or did you always think it would, or were you just kind of doing it for something to do?
I was much more hesitant as far as like I think from day one when we recorded like the first 2 episodes, I think like one of which we just never published because it was pretty trash. I think from day one, Chris always was like, yeah, this is going to be a full-time thing eventually, which it isn't yet, but like I've definitely been convinced. For me, it probably took, I don't really remember when I first thought that it could be a full-time thing, but it took probably until like the 8th episode to where like between that and some of the other traction that we got, I was like, okay, maybe in like a year or something like that, I could see it going somewhere. Yeah. But because we just had the time, like it was literally, between us like buying the site and having plans for that, and just like having so much time over quarantine, and we were able to just randomly get these guests. Like our first guest was Nick Simmons, and we are like, okay, well, if we can just do that and like hang out with people, and make content from it that hopefully some people enjoy, then why not?
Yeah, and it's not the podcast itself would not be a full-time thing, but it's like the combination of all the different avenues, like the website and the podcast and the YouTube. It's really kind of building. It takes a while. It takes a while to build up an audience. As I'm sure you're aware as well, having a podcast is that you see your numbers go up over time, and it does take time. But you have one person tell their friend that tells their friend, and slowly over time, if you're putting out good content, people will eventually find it. And so it's a very slow process, but I think kind of all the different pieces together is what will make it hopefully become a full-time thing for us in the future. But yeah, right now, I mean, just really enjoying the chance to meet all these guests that come on the podcast, and it's really cool to get to know everyone. And everyone that we've met or gotten to know better on the podcast has been like, it's like, man, I would hang out with this person. Like, there's been like no one that we've talked to where I've said like, oh, I really didn't like that. Every single person's like, man, I would love to be friends with this guy or girl. If we lived anywhere close to them, like I would love to be friends with them and hang out with them. So if anything, it's just been a great opportunity for us to meet new people.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. Like the podcast is, and as you mentioned, I know a bit as well. Maybe haven't had as big as names as some of the athletes you guys have had on, but even in terms of people that maybe I race against, people on my team, people in Ireland that I know, you do feel like you kind of build a bigger connection. And then when you see them, then racing, the week after or so, you feel like you can kind of support them that much more, and it feels again like you have that stronger connection.
For sure. Don't sell yourself short. You've had some great guests on, and also you're super young too. So I mean, we didn't figure this out until way after you. So you got a lot of advantage over what we've done because you're so early as well. So it's awesome to see kids putting out podcasts and starting that, because I mean, even if it's not a lifelong thing, if it's just for a few years, I think you can learn so much from it, get to meet good people, and it's awesome to see. So props to you. I would have never been courageous enough to do that when I was your age. That's for sure.
Oh, thank you. No, I really do appreciate it. But kind of in terms of your podcast, you mentioned there that you kind of would like to see, maybe not even the podcast itself, but the other areas where you've branched out, you'd like to see it become a full-time thing. In terms of the podcast itself, was it kind of like an investment straight away where you're like, right, we'll get the microphones, we'll get the equipment that we need to kind of set us up now for the long term, or was it more of a slow process into it?
As far as the podcast goes, I think the website, like the initial investment into the website aside, it was kind of a trickle of, okay, well, Chris and I have GoPros just because we're active people and we like taking them on vacation and stuff. So that's what we first started using for video. I think we both we're actually using our like one of our snowballs, which is like what, $39?
The original microphone we had.
Yeah. So like we both had one of those from.
Just because we had it, I think
just like random shit. So we kind of like cobbled together some gear and like slowly figured out on the editing and like importing side. And then I think we switched from GoPros to like using my iPhone for recording a lot of our podcasts, like video. Yeah. And then recently we just got like an actual DSLR camera.
Yeah, so it's been a slow trickle where like we didn't like upfront, other than buying the website, that was the main expense. But upfront, I mean, really we just bought like a cheap green screen online, some really cheap lighting, just like $20-$30 on lighting, and then we already had the microphone. So we just started there, and then as we grew, we just started acquiring things one piece at a time. Like the first in-person podcast we did, we had to up our game and actually get microphones and like a recording device and that sort of thing. But it's been just like as it seems like it's the right time to invest in something else, then we do it. I think you can do. I mean, especially now, you can do great things with just an iPhone and like your basic laptop microphone.
Like even if you just get like a lamp that is you can point it somewhere, like the extra lighting is pretty decent for spending what, $12.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing about podcasts is it's just a conversation. If you have a half decent microphone and maybe even a half decent camera, if you post them to YouTube, like you'll be set to go. So then again, once you start fully committing to it and making it a full-time thing, then the money you get out of it, you can start putting back into it and really committing to it. So yeah, it is a really easy thing to just start up. Like I remember I started mine up with a pair of earbuds and my iPhone 6 sitting on my bed, just absolutely waffling into the microphone. And well, no, it does. Then you come a long way, and then you can kind of look back from where you started and be proud of it.
Yeah, I was listening to, I think my aunt was playing one of our first podcasts. Like she just had it on her phone at my parents' house this weekend, and I could tell like the audio was from either, like, I think it was from our GoPro actually. I was like, wow, that sounds pretty bad compared to what we have now.
Yep.
It keeps you humble.
Yep.
No, definitely. It's good to have them things there to look back on again and see how far you've come. Obviously, when the opportunity came about for you to buy into the Bearmile, company or brand, whatever you kind of want to call it, was the Bearmile always something that you lads were interested in? Was it something that you kind of done through college, or did you kind of start getting into it now that you feel like you had to live up to the brand name?
Yeah, I can give my backstory first. So I think like most people, did my first Bearmile like as part of my running club and it was when I was in college. And I think it's like pretty common thing, like at the end of the season, for a team to get together and do a Bearmile. So I did that kind of throughout college, like a couple times a year, and then eventually got to the point where I was good enough at it to go to some of the world championship races and compete. And so I've been competing internationally in the Bearmile for like 6 years now. And so so I've known that it's a sport. It's really still like an underground sport, I would say, where there's no like central authority for it or league or anything like that. And it's also really just you and your friends going to the track and doing one together on a weekend. And it's kind of really like local and underground. But what we have noticed, like being a part of it, is that a lot of people do the Bearmile. Like pretty much every team that I know of, or pretty much every runner that I know, has done a Bearmile at some point. And so we knew that it was like a very common thing to do, a very common sport, but there wasn't really a central. I mean, Bearmile.com is like the central place for Bearmile results and everything, but that we saw it as an opportunity where like people who don't necessarily run or not serious about running, they know about beer and know about beer culture, and they can understand that drinking 4 beers and running a mile in 5 minutes or 6 minutes is like super crazy, because to them just chugging 4 beers in 5 minutes is crazy. So then like, and you also run a mile? Like I couldn't run a mile in 8 minutes when I was in physical education class in my high school days or whatever. So it's something that people can relate to, which is maybe a little different. Like professional running, when someone goes out and runs like a 5,000 meter on the track, I think the only people that can really appreciate that are runners. Like we can appreciate that because we understand how hard that is and what a time means, but not many people that are the general public really know like what that means. But I don't know, something about combining the beer with it just makes it a lot more, I guess, fun, approachable, and just a good opportunity to reach kind of both audiences, the runners and then the just beer drinkers, general community, and kind of bring the two together. So from that standpoint, the Bearmile.com website's existed for like 25 years, but it just hasn't, the previous owner of it just didn't have time to really update it that often because he has several other jobs and he's an entrepreneur. And so it has a ton of results in there. A lot of people submit results, view records, all that, but it wasn't getting really the tender loving, TLC, the tender loving care that it deserves. So we figured we would be good people to do it because we are so familiar with the Bearmile, and because there could be an opportunity for it to be a more centralized thing, or like a league, or like could you bet on beer miles? Like, do you want to watch other people do beer miles because it's a cool thing to see? Like, there's just a lot of opportunity with it. So that was kind of our thinking behind doing it. What's your story? Give your story of how you did your first beer mile.
My take?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like even in high school, like we would do chocolate milk miles at the end of a season. Yeah. In college, it was usually like twice a year at the end of cross, and then at the end of track, you just do a beer mile for fun. So like I did that for a while, was never like fast at it. And then I didn't like post graduation, I didn't really do a whole lot. I might have done like one every other year until recently. And then Chris and I, we were like, after like getting to know each other, we were kind of similar in the sense that like we wanted to start some sort of thing that like wasn't work, but wasn't necessarily like a full-time thing yet, because obviously we have like other responsibilities, not quite families, but like at least mortgages. So like we knew we wanted to start something. We probably tried and failed at, or like just like forgot about a few projects, and then come like, because Chris knew a lot of people involved with the beer mile, and he was like in that community from running, I guess like what you would like professionally for it. So he was like in the know for that, and it kind of just came to a point where we're like, hold on, like I feel like we fit all the key skills here. Like it's really just a database of results, but we have this huge community that we can engage. Chris already knows everybody from actually doing the beer mile. And then we just kind of went from there.
Yeah, that's a great point, that this wasn't like our first endeavor. Like we've known that we've wanted to like be entrepreneurial and like find something outside, like a side project outside of work that could become something. Because like I think like many people, like the goal is like, can I be my own boss and like do something that I really want to do, be an entrepreneur? So we like have tried and had ideas on other things, and so this wasn't like this wasn't the first thing that we did. It was really that when it came up as an opportunity, it was like, oh, like this might be the one idea that was like worth continuing.
Yeah, this is what the one thing that actually is like something that could blow up, and we don't have to like force it, because we want to do naturally fit all of kind of the quote unquote requirements.
Exactly.
Definitely. No, that there really, really are interesting stories in terms of how, you had, again, kind of going back to the balance of the beer mile, but then just the knowledge of running as well. And again, that does really translate when you do go off and listen to your podcast, because I know you have mentioned a good few times that you're the running podcast that doesn't actually talk about running. You kind of go off and talk about, the beer mile, music, social media, everything, which, like you mentioned, Chris, is kind of, it's really, for anyone that's not as big into running, it's still a podcast where people can go and kind of just have a laugh, have a good time, and still get to know a bit about the sport and a bit about the athlete as well, which is obviously really, really good.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And that is really our intention, to try to get people who don't really care about running or haven't previously cared about following running, to get them to know the athlete stories. And then we do have listeners that I think only listen to the podcast for the beer reviews, to be honest, which is kind of something we just do for fun. Like, it's not like a focus point of the show. It's like 5 minutes at the end just for fun. But we definitely have people who, like, when we don't do beer reviews, like, ask about it.
Hey, what gives?
Yeah, or like when we do a beer review and they're like, oh, I completely disagree with your review of that beer. So I think we are getting some good traction in that regard, that it's not just runners, and hopefully that just having some good banter with the guests is entertaining for anyone, whether they like running or not. That's the real goal.
Definitely. And from a few of the episodes I listened to, I've noticed a few times you've done segments where you've asked a few spicy questions, and I know we're only 20 minutes in, but I kind of want to give you a bit of taste of your own medicine. And I know on your own podcast, you answered this question before, but for anyone that hasn't seen that episode or seen the podcast before, on the topic of your podcast, who is your least favorite and favorite guest, and why? You can obviously give the same answer and the same reason for when you answered this question previously. That's no problem. Or if you want to kind of change it up, you're more than welcome to.
I forget what you answered last time.
Yeah,
I remember what I answered last time. I think I want to change mine to Vanessa and Sinclair
as favorite or least favorite?
As my least favorite.
Least favorite.
Because both being on the Barman Track Club, because I think if we redid it now, there would be so much shit talking, and like
it'd be way more.
I think the conversation would be much more livelier, I think.
Yeah. So we that was the first time we had spoken with Vanessa and Sinclair, was in just recording the podcast. Yeah. But then we have since met Sinclair like gone to track meets where she's been at and gotten to know her. So I think we were all like super nervous, and we didn't know like what the line was for like what we could say and not say, or like what level of shit talk that we could do. So I think that's a fair one to say least favorite. Okay, so what's your favorite then?
Well, I feel like if we're on this is probably just like a plug because of being from Ireland, and I don't know.
See, that was my answer last time. Was Kieran?
Yeah, dude, I loved his music. Like, hopefully he doesn't think that every now and then I'll like post on Insta, like on my story whenever.
Tag him.
Sometimes we're like streaming it or whatever, but like I genuinely listen to Kieran's music a lot.
yeah, and he's just an entertaining like story all around because he has such a good personality outside of running as well. Like he has all these other pieces, like working at Nike and DJing, and he's just an all around like very fun person,
like
interesting
guy.
person. Yeah. Okay, so you take my answer from last time. I see how it is. Okay, well, gosh, I mean, least favorite is always so hard. I feel like after every single episode with someone, it's like my favorite and my least favorite at the same time. It's like least favorite, and that I always am like, oh, I should have said this differently or done this differently. But also my most favorite because I'm like, oh, I got to know them better and I really like them. Yeah. So that's really hard. I'm trying to think of like who was the most surprising, like someone who was like surprisingly like funny, or like the conversation just flowed way better. Man, we got so many guests at this point. It's getting harder to answer this. I mean, the easiest answer for least favorite is really like anyone who was one of our first, I would say. Just it's pretty because it's a pretty easy answer because
we didn't know what the fuck we were doing.
We didn't really know what we were doing.
The quality of the guests, but kind of the quality of the hosts nearly.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Gosh. I mean,
one easy favorite is Eric and Craig. That was a good one.
Yeah, Eric and any of the in person, I'd say is a favorite. Like the one that just came out with Bryce Hoppel, like in person, amazing. Craig and Eric, amazing. Colleen Quigley being in person, amazing. So I think if I'm going on that theme, I'll do it this way. I think the people that I would like to do one in person with, especially like say after a season is over that we've had on, would be like maybe Justin Knight or like Cooper and Cole. I think would both be great from the Oregon team. Those are a couple. I mean, really anybody, but anyone that we could have in person. But I'm just thinking of a couple that come to mind where I think it could maybe get a little rowdy after the season's over. And those are a couple that come to mind.
Justin, I can just picture it's like we're all in somebody's apartment or Airbnb playing FIFA and just like getting
Yeah. So I guess I didn't really technically answer least favorite, did I? But
what do you think was your worst performance?
Oh yeah,
worst performance. Oh man, I don't know. Whichever one where you had to carry and ask more questions than me, I don't know. Okay, actually, okay. So I'll say this for the least favorite. I think the episode that we did with Trials of Miles, so Cooper and Dave of Trials of Miles and Chris Chavez. I don't even remember what episode, like 28, 29, something like that. I think it was my least favorite in that there were so many people on, like, because we had 3 guests at once. I think it was really hard to. It was just like uncoordinated, and it was really hard to get everyone involved in the conversation, and especially over Zoom, it was very difficult to. I think that Adam and I are sitting side by side, so it's easy. But when they're all on 3 different microphones, there was like this lag, and it was like asking a question and like who's gonna jump in, and the conversation didn't really like flow super well in my opinion. So I think that was probably, I'd say, one of my least favorite, just because it was like the technical limitations of it made it not as good a quality as it should have been.
Yeah, I think that would have been one of those where if it was in person, it would have been 10 times better.
Exactly.
I guess like when we did Chris Chavez, when we did the pre-meet coverage at the KC qualifier, that was just like all live but in person, so it was like supernatural and much more. It flowed a lot better.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I gave the Trials and Miles episode there a listen last week, I think it was, and from being on the call, maybe it was a little bit more awkward when people were interrupting each other, but from an outsider listening, it was like, not that you didn't notice as much, but it was kind of expected as well with the amount of people there, but again, kind of you didn't really notice. It was just like you'd ask the question and it would be like half a second or so, and then someone would answer. So maybe I can understand. I even know for myself after kind of you do an episode with someone, you're like, maybe I should have said this question better, or this could have gone a little bit better. But no, definitely from an outsider listening, it was perfect.
Well, good to hear. Good to hear. We also do quite a bit of editing after the fact too. I mean, some episodes more than others. Some you don't have to edit at all, but try to at least get rid of any awkward pauses or anything like that. But I mean, for the most part, our guests, the conversations flow really well, and there's minimal of that. But yeah, hopefully, yeah. I'll guess I'll give myself some credit for some wizard editing as well.
Definitely. I think one more spicy question we might go with here, because we're not too long into the episode, so we don't want to have any tension for the remaining time. Is one pet peeve you have for each other while recording an episode? Is there anything that the other person, or even while editing, someone might always kind of, Chris, you mentioned that you do a good portion of the editing, and Adam, you take over more the media side of things during kind of the time period of recording and releasing an episode. Is there anything the other person does that kind of might get on your nerves a little bit?
That's a good one. I like that. I actually have pet peeves for myself, so I can.
you can shoot them out if you want.
Interesting.
Are you
I'm thinking
okay, so I'll go first. So I would say, at least from my perspective, maybe Adam would disagree with this. I think Adam screws up more when we're recording the intros and the outros
100%.
to the podcast. So so essentially we'll always like talk to the guest for an hour, and then afterwards, because we know what we talked about, we'll do like the 5-minute intro, 5-minute outro just to introduce them. And I feel like Adam is always like either purposely messing up. I guess I do. I mean, I do too. I'm not to say that I never do, but either purposely messing up, or I'm like, Adam, all you have to say is like plug the guest that gave us a 5-star review, and he'll like forget what he was saying midway through, and then there's like 10 takes of like one line.
Yeah, dude.
So I would say that you probably do that more than me.
I'm either because I'm either like on or off. Like I have like a certain amount of gas, and then like once I run out, I'm just like, we're just hitting rock bottom. Like when we recorded with Jen and Ryan
Gregson,
it was like we did the interview, that went really well. It was probably 11.
But it took all your brain power to do the interview. You ran out of brain power.
And it was like 11 p.m. our time, and we were just trying to get through the intro and outro, and we were like saying funny shit, but like I couldn't like put all the pieces together, and it was just like I don't know how much time Chris spent on editing, but that was probably one of the most edited clips that we've had.
For sure.
No, I respect Adam, the fact that you can, you don't take it to heart, and you can kind of use it then to work on it. So no, I do respect that.
Yeah, man, criticism or whenever people say something about you is either completely true and you just gotta like live with it and maybe find it funny, or it's just like false. So it doesn't matter. Yeah. Biggest pet peeve about Chris while we're recording. I feel like at the start, and this is probably just like getting to know each other's like flows more during interviewing a guest. I think at the start, Chris and I would like not know where the other one was going, and then sometimes I would have like a preconceived thought of like where the conversation was going and line up points of discussion around that, and then like Chris would go off into a different point. I'm like, oh shit, like what are we talking about now?
Yeah, that's fair. I think I was actually gonna say one of my I guess pet peeves or like improvement areas for myself is like if there's any sort of silence, I like feel like that's awkward, and so I'll always be the person to jump in. So that actually ties into that perfectly, because if there's like any pause, instead of just like, because pauses are natural when you're speaking. If there's any sort of pause, I'll be like, oh, I gotta jump in and say something because it's awkward, even though it's not. And then because of that, then I end up like, basically driving the conversation somewhere. And then Adam's more of a like slower to respond sometimes, not always, but like slower to respond. And then I like just take control of it from him, basically.
It's funny because like as we've figured each other out in terms of how we interview people, like Chris is much better at like defining like conversation points and then like driving towards those. And I just have like the way I prep is just like go like stalk whatever person on social media, or like Google everything about them, but write no notes. And then just like as we're talking, just like come up with shit.
A couple things will pop into your head based on where
which like you can't necessarily make an entire episode about that, but like it plays well with the structure.
It does.
Content.
It does.
Definitely, yeah. And then it sounds a little bit more natural as well, because then, you know, when you have an episode and you're going from one thing to another, other than having it like structured, you know, really well, where it can be too structured, where it sounds kind of a bit robotic in a sense and more like an interview and not a conversation. So that can obviously as well have its pros and cons. But no, they were two good ones, and definitely some areas maybe where he's can look into improving. But there was definitely nothing major there. I don't know, maybe you were holding back a little bit. I don't know.
I like these spicy questions. They're good.
No, I think if we were holding back and there was something bigger that we had pet peeves about with each other, then we probably would have just stopped the podcast at this point. I think it's like we enjoy doing it enough that like any sort of pet peeves, it's like whatever. And we're doing this for fun, and like I think that the perspective of okay, we're doing this for fun first, so you know whatever. Like it is what it is. It's not going to be perfect. This isn't meant to be like an NPR thing. I don't know if you're familiar with NPR, but like it's not meant to be like an ESPN production. It's not meant to be like that good. It is supposed to be a little informal. So we're gonna have mistakes, and
I think we also just like we keep it pretty in the moment. Like we're not one to dwell on something that went poorly. Like
for sure.
Like back to me like coming up with random shit to ask during the interviews. I say there are probably so many things, so many questions that I ask that don't make sense because I've either like just like spent too much time inside my own brain or like had too many years, and I'm like, here's a super creative question, and it like doesn't land.
It doesn't hit.
Right? Like there's plenty of that, but then we just like kind of move on from it and chuckle. We chuckle about it later.
Yeah.
No, but that's the nice thing of having like a co-host, because there's been many times I've been recording with someone, and you know, I just think of something else and I kind of zone out, and I come back in and I'm like, oh wait, what are we talking about again? And I just try and make a question up off the top of my head, but then feel like having someone there beside you who maybe was a bit tuned in more than you were is nice, so they can kind of take it from there. So that's it's good to hear that, you know, you have little things where maybe you feel like you can work on, but other than that, it's pretty much smooth sailing from there. I know you asked this question to this isn't a spicy question, don't worry, it's just a normal question. To, you know, when you have some people who are, you know, on some teams, like, you know, sponsorship teams or whatever, who they think on their team would be the best at the Bearmile. But in the world of track and field, you know, on kind of the big stage at the moment, who do you think, in your personal opinions, would be the best at a normal Bearmile?
Yeah, we like to ask our guests because, I mean, that I guess that's the one tie back to the Bearmile podcast of it all is the name is asking them. I think so. I definitely think Eric Jenkins, based on how fast he can chug and just he's super fast. You never know if someone's going to be able to do 4 beers. That's really the hard part is can they get to 4 beers and their stomach is okay? Like even if they have the chugging speed on the first one, you know, it's really hard to get to 4. So, but I think Eric, I don't know, based on his chugging speed and his running speed, I'm pretty confident that he could throw down something.
When we asked him,
he's also pretty confident.
Yeah, he was pretty confident.
I mean, I think that's definitely up there as a ringer for me.
So I'll go off of I think during the NYC qualifier, something about Eric Holt, just like his post-race interview, I was like, okay, he's fast enough, and he's got like the energy for it. He seems like he could chug a beer. Like he might be a dark horse.
He's a good one to bring into the mix too. And he's also you need an iron stomach, and he's definitely coming from like lifting a lot of weights and stuff. He's like a beefier dude, and so I think that could play well though. Yeah. Because I feel like he could just No, I didn't even think about that. That's a really good one.
He just seems like he's like balls to the wall. Like I don't care. Like I'm gonna get it done.
Yeah, he's so competitive. He's like, I'm gonna win this race. I'm just gonna do it. Yeah, that's a really good one. From what we've heard from some other guests, that maybe some Bowerman guys could be good if they try, like Lopez Lamont potentially. Yeah.
Pat Casey also.
Yeah, also someone said Pat Casey. Yeah. But I could see like someone like Lopez, absolutely crushing it as well. It's so hard to predict. It's so hard to predict who's gonna have that iron stomach and who's not. But
because that's I feel like people think just because Corey Belmore is the world record holder that it's like, oh, all it takes is a professional athlete, but like, like the chugging is probably like 70 to 80. Chugging and keeping it down is probably 70 to 80% of the work.
Yeah, I mean, I think the stomach thing is like either you can do it or you can't. Yeah, like you can learn to chug quicker, like that part can be learned, but like. Whether your stomach can hold 4 beers down, whether you can still run basically a PR mile with 4 beers in your stomach, it's like not everyone can do that. And I think and I don't think you can necessarily learn it. Like some people's stomachs are just like, no, you're poisoning me, stop. And other people's stomachs are like, oh, that's fine, whatever. Yeah.
That's a good point. I was gonna ask, like, what do you have like some people in the triathlon think running is the most important, like swimming and cycling. It's kind of then the same in the Bearmile. What do you think is the most important aspect? Is it A, either the actual chugging, B, keeping it down, or C, the running?
For sure, keeping it down.
Yeah, keep it. Because then that plays in the others. I mean, so when you're actually doing the race, like you are running 90% of the time. Like the chugging is a small part if you're doing it well, but the chugging can also become 2 minutes of the race, 3 minutes of the race if you're bad at it. Yeah. So it's almost like, I mean, at least on the actual people who do this internationally and race each other, it does come down to who's the fastest runner, because everyone that's competing internationally can all chug the same pace and they can all keep it down. Yeah. So those are like givens. And so then it does come down to, okay, Corey Belmore can beat me in a mile, so he's going to beat me in the Bearmile. Yeah. But if we're talking so that's people who are experienced at it. But if we're just talking in general, like what are if I were to go with a running club to the track, I wouldn't be basing it off of, this guy can run 5 minutes for the mile and this other guy can run 6 minutes, so I'm going to pick the 5-minute guy. That wouldn't be the main consideration. It would be like, can this person drink 48 ounces of fluid really close back to back? And that's way more important just for like your general general beer mile. It's like, can they drink that much and hold it down? Yeah,
I would say, because like chugging is more of a mentality where it's like you just have to suck it down, which is why I'm bad at it, I think. Because like past number one, like, dude, why am I doing this? And I like can't keep focused. But I think the bigger part is after you're done chugging, like how efficient are you at actually running and keeping that down? That's the biggest thing, is like, especially when we did the Chunder mile, is like you finish chugging and then like the real work begins of like, okay, I need to like run this lap and also not puke.
Yeah, you have to focus on running a fast lap at the same time as your stomach is killing you, and you're trying to focus on that as well. Yeah. It's a feeling you got to get used to, and that's why that's what even all these pro runners, I think a lot of them definitely could crush it, but whether they could do it on the first try or not, also like a complete question. Like I feel like most of them know it would take a few times to really understand what it feels like, because it is a unique feeling. And just you get in at the end of a lap and you're breathing super hard, and you have to like hold your breath for 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds, maybe longer if it takes you longer to chug, to like pour fluid down your throat. So it's like you got to be okay in your head, like, all right, it's okay, like I know I'm like drowning and can't breathe for 8 seconds, but it's gonna be okay. That's like it's just something you got to get used to. It's like a weird.
The crazy thing is, it's like you don't I mean, besides at like the World Championships, there's never like a ton of hype or like viewers, because it's like we said, more of an underground thing. So you don't have that like crowd when you're doing like your local 5K and coming down the finish chute to hype you up.
Yeah.
It literally feels like you're doing a time trial, but you're really biffing it, and it's like it's super humid out, and you're like, why am I doing this? But you just have to like do the thing.
That's a good. Most of the time, you're doing the beer mile with like 1 or 2 friends at the track, and you're like, why are we doing this? Like, nobody cares if we do this. What are we doing?
Right.
No, definitely, and like you know, people might think when you get to the point of where you're actually drinking the beer, you kind of get a bit of a break. So coming up to actually the point during the race where you're actually down in the drinks, is it like, oh yeah, we get a bit of a break now, or is that kind of the dreaded part?
I feel like it depends how you race.
Yeah.
I would suggest that something that I've changed is like the last 100 meters in a lap, you kind of like pump the brakes a little bit so you catch your breath.
Get your breathing under
control.
Because
it's definitely probably the first time you do a beer mile, you're like, oh well, I don't have to run during the drinking, but it's like, yeah, but you kind of holding your breath, which sucks.
Yeah. No, I think that's. I think one reason that I am decent. So like in the beer mile, I can essentially run my mile PR like just as fast as I can run without the beer. Yeah. But I think part of it is that I do, for like having done a few of that, well, a bunch of them at this point, and I think the mindset of like that you are switching between what you're thinking about, I think almost helps, because like in a mile race, you're just running the whole time, and like on lap 2, if you're hurting, you're like, oh no, like this is bad.
This is all I'm going to think about for the next 1,200.
Yeah, but in the beer mile, each lap, it's like just I got to get through this lap, and then you're on the beer, and then I just got to get through this beer, and then so it's really
it compartmentalizes.
It's like a 4x400 workout instead of a mile, and so each lap is just okay. I just got to get to this beer with a little bit of breath, and then chug it, and then I'll worry about the next lap later. And so I don't know. I almost think that if you can get into a good mindset with that by practicing. I mean, some people are probably like, oh man, I've only done 1 beer in 1 lap, I'm screwed. But if you can get into the point where you're kind of just chunking it out and like taking it 1 lap at a time, 1 beer at a time, then that mindset, I don't know, it seems to work pretty well for me. It wasn't easy. I mean, it took a long time to get there, but that I don't know. I don't like look forward to drinking the beer each lap. I'll put it that way. But I look forward to getting to stop running for a few seconds.
True.
You mentioned there, it kind of took you a while to get to kind of where obviously the chugging, the fitness, and the mindset where you need to be for the beer mile. Is there kind of training that goes into it specifically? Like, Chris, when you were saying, you were competing at kind of a high level or on international level, was there kind of like, would you go out to the track and do a workout where it was like, 8x400 and every second lap you'd down a beer before it, or was it kind of just you do your running, you do your normal training, and then maybe one of the days at the weekend you try chug a beer as quickly as you could?
Yeah, right now that I've basically got the drinking part down, and there's not really, I can't go any faster drinking. It's just pouring it down my throat every lap. Now that I've done that, I don't ever go to the track and do any sort of combined workout. So it's really just running training. And then the training that I do for the drinking piece is actually just keeping an empty beer bottle by my kitchen sink and just filling it up with water. And then I'll chug that a bunch. Either like, just chug it throughout the day as I want water for practicing the chugging skill, or like filling up like 4 of them and trying to chug them all in a minute or something to get used to the volume. So that's really all I do now. But I will say, when I was like earlier in it, I would never do beer, like take beer during a workout. I would never do that, because I think it's still more important to be able to, like, I don't know, out well and be in good shape. But I would once in a while like do strides or something and place like a empty beer bottle with water in it. I'd like place it at the end of like a 200 meter stride or something. So like do a stride into it and then grab the bottle and practice chugging while I was out of breath. I definitely did that a lot early on until I got used to it, and that helped a lot. But honestly, I don't think I've ever combined beer and running outside of an actual beer mile race. I've never done that in training. It's always just been water, pretty much.
If you want to see some good footage of that, though, you should go to Dale Clutterbuck's YouTube.
Oh yeah,
because he has some clips where he and his buddies are like running up a 200 meter, 300 meter hill, and like they do 10 hill sprints, and at the top of every single one they're chugging beer, and it's like, holy shit, how are you guys doing this?
Yeah. There's a guy from, I don't know if you've heard of him, but there's a guy from England named Dale. I think his YouTube might be Dale King Clutterbuck, but he has some good videos out there for listeners. Back when he was competing in the beer mile as well, and him and I went head to head. Actually, the year that he made all those videos was him and I went head to head in London for, I think it was 2017 beer mile. So yeah, if you want to see someone really struggle through beer and running together, and Dale's previously pro runner, so he's super fast as well. But can see that in action. But just stick to chugging the waters, and I think you'll be fine. That's my main advice when people ask me for beer mile tips.
Definitely. And Adam, earlier in the episode, you mentioned your first taste of running and kind of drinking a drink at the same time was your early days with some chocolate milk, but then I'd say moving on then to the alcoholic beverages, if you will, and down in the beers each lap. When did you actually get your no pun intended, but your first taste of the beer mile?
That was probably, so I didn't do it right when I got to college. It was probably my junior year, so when I was 20-ish.
Okay.
So if the government was asking, I was 21, but definitely 20 at the time. I want to say it was after cross country my junior year. Yeah.
At the end of the cross country season. Yeah.
I'm trying to think what I even did it. I think I did it with Bud Light Platt, which was a huge mistake. But that was what was available.
Do you remember what your first time was? I think you've told me.
750.
That's what I thought. It was it was respectable. It was a respectable first attempt.
Dude, so I was probably top 7-ish, top 10-ish for junior and senior year in club, which was, we had a pretty decent club. And I think besides Will and AJ, who were two of the faster guys, I think it was third or fourth in the beer mile, because every one of our varsity guys was puking on lap 2, and I could at least make it to lap 3 before I had a waddle lap. You know?
Yeah. We had some good people on our team when just for the beer mile. I'd say we had some quite a few guys that were above average, but also you said a bunch of guys that are really fast, but they just couldn't do the beer mile.
Yeah, for club, I think it was either that junior. I think it was my senior year that we won nationals. Granted, we had this really fast guy from where
was he from? Germany?
Yeah,
I think he was from Germany. Yeah, foreign exchange student.
But everyone was super fast. They just couldn't beer mile, and I'm not a fast beer miler by any means, but was good enough to have bragging rights for that night.
Yeah.
Definitely, and you have come quite a long way, obviously, in terms of the beer mile. You have a big brand for now, with a podcast, a YouTube channel. But in terms of the actual times and your personal records yourself, Chris, you recently just set the new Chunder Bearmile record, with a time of 4:53, which we'll talk about now. But running on its own is hard enough. And people always say the only reason you go back to it is because of that feeling when you're done. But with the beer mile, some videos I watched your videos, with the Chunder mile, it doesn't look like it feels good when you're finished. So what is it that draws you back to it? What is that thing that's today we're gonna go out and do a beer mile? Because for videos I've seen, you are puking afterwards.
It doesn't look pretty when you finish it, but by the time you like walk back to the track is what, a half mile from here?
Yeah. But like 10 minutes after, 20 minutes after the race, 10 minutes.
By the time you walk back to the apartment, you're like, that was pretty fun.
Yeah,
also a little drunk.
Yeah, it is one of those things where I kind of like it sounds really fun to do, then you do it, and then halfway through you're like, why am I doing this? And then you finish and you're like, that sucked, and then 10 or 20 minutes later you're like, oh, that was fun, we'll do it again. It's like just like anything, it's like that. But I mean, definitely the two that, so of the different beer events I've done, like the Bearmile is really honestly not that bad. Like for me it's not even painful at the end. It just feels the same as if I raced a mile race, because for better or worse, 4 beers in my stomach is like totally fine, and I never throw up after a beer mile. But after like the Chunder mile, which is the imperial pints, so a lot more beer, or like when I did the beer 2 mile, which was 8 beers in 8 laps. Yeah, in both of those cases, like felt your stomach just feels like it's huge, like a bowling ball in your stomach, because you have so much fluid in there. And in those cases, yeah, it feels really bad for the minute or two afterwards until you can actually like go chunder. And then after that, then like Adam said, like after the carbonation settles and you like either vomit some of it out or burp it out, or it just like digests a little bit, then you are a good mix of like you both ran a race, so you have the like runner's high as well as you've got some beer in your system too, so you're feeling good from that. So I guess from that regard, it is fun, but it's not something. It is absolutely not something that we like do every week or anything like it's not. It's fun for the few times a year that you do it.
I feel like it's kind of like what I imagine a marathon to be, where you can like analyze the entire beer mile or chunder mile and like what you did, and there's so many like key points where like, well, if I just like tweaked that one thing, like if I just like really focused on the third beer, and did X, Y, or Z, then it's like, then I would have done a minute better. So I feel like it's kind of like a marathon in that aspect, where there's so much room for improvement that you can't help but like analyze your performance as you're kind of like stumbling home from it and being like, okay, well, next time it's going to be better. I'm going to be fast.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. Marathon way longer, but similar thing where it's miserable while you're doing it, and then afterwards for a while. But people still want to keep going back and doing it to get better. That's a weird comparison,
especially for not having run a marathon.
But that is exactly what it is.
Yeah, for not run a marathon, you seem to really know a lot about it, and not only wrestling, but kind of now moving on to the world record then you set there, Chris, a few weeks back in the Chunder Mile. I watched the YouTube video you guys posted there a few weeks ago when the record was set. For the listeners at home, if you just want to kind of just explain the rules of a Chunder Mile compared to a normal beer mile.
Sure, yeah. So the beer mile, and it's hard because in Europe it's harder to find it's harder to find. It's a 355 milliliter, which isn't as common. You have 330 more commonly. But the standard, kind of what became the standard beer mile rules, so that we could have the same rules for our international races, so that, you got to agree to something. And so we agreed to the beer mile being 4 355 or cans, either one, it doesn't matter. So the difference then with the Chunder mile is that it's, and this is a lot more common in the UK. And I'd be curious to hear after this if you have heard of, like, if the Chunder mile is more common, or beer mile, like what people that you've heard around you do. But the Chunder mile then is 4 imperial pints, which for, I guess, if anyone's listening in the US, 20 ounces versus 12 ounces for a bottle or can. So it ends up being like an extra 2 2/3 beers, but you get to drink it out of a pint glass. So in theory, it's a lot quicker to chug. It's a
wider mouth.
Yeah, wider mouth and open glass, and then there's not the carbonation because it's sitting in this glass. So it's same thing as the beer mile, just different volume of beer and different container that you're using.
And you're allowed to puke during.
That is the one other thing. Yeah, you're allowed to puke without doing a penalty lap. So it ended up being the record. It ended up being slower than my beer mile time, and I think part of it is because, actually no, I think my chugging was probably about the same time as the beer mile. So I think the main thing is really that because you have so much more volume in you, it's harder to run fast on laps 2, 3, and 4 than it is on 2, 3, and 4 of the beer mile.
Yeah.
That's the main difference, is that by the time you get to lap 4 of the Chunder mile, and you've got like all this fluid in you, I was like, the whole last lap, I wasn't even thinking about like trying to run faster. I was just thinking about like trying to calm my mind and say,
Yeah.
don't throw up. So it's like it's a completely different mindset. Whereas in the beer mile, it's like the last lap, I'm able to say like, oh, like let's try to run a 60-second last lap.
You can
like
race
let's go for it. Let's race it. Chunder mile, you can't really race evenly. You positive split basically every lap because you're getting so full. So that's the main difference. Yeah, Kieran, is that correct that the Chunder mile you see as like more popular in the UK? Is that what you see as well, or no?
Anyway, what I've heard of it is it's pretty much just the normal beer mile I've heard of. Obviously you mentioned there the Chunder mile, you don't have the penalty lap from what I've heard previously. Just with the normal beer mile around, from people I've heard around me that have done a beer mile, it's if you do puke, you do have to do the penalty lap. So I'd say then just the normal beer mile would probably be a little bit more popular over here.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess maybe it's different everywhere. I know the people that do the beer mile that are from England, for sure in England, they grew up, well, not grew up, they didn't grow up doing the beer mile. And when they were in university and after, they more commonly did the Chunder mile than the beer mile. So maybe it is more England, I guess, than UK in general. But yeah, I've always wondered that. But I don't know. They're each fun in their own way, but I think I'd much prefer the beer mile over the Chunder mile.
Is not fun.
Okay, Chunder mile's not.
I kind of don't like that you can puke during it, because that just like it puts that there mentally where you're like, oh, I can if I need to, but it really just slows you down if you do it.
If you have to stop and do it, yeah. That's why I'm glad I just didn't, because then if I did and got the record, then there would be question on like, should there be a penalty lap? So I'm glad I didn't until afterwards, of course. Afterwards, it was coming out.
So then, it kind of the race itself. Obviously, Adam, you ran it as well, and KLC, you did like doing any sort of a beer mile or Chunder mile, or running after even just drinking one beer is definitely hard enough. And I don't know when I'm older if it's something I'd even want to try. So for the both of you, whoever wants to kind of start it off, how was the experience? Was it the first time you've done a Chunder mile? And kind of how was the experience for you?
Oh God, for me it was the first Chunder mile I ever did, and we did like a pre-video the 2 nights before, because it's pretty common to like get all your beer and then pour it into a separate container so you can let the carbonation out. And so we were like measuring everything out, and for whatever reason, we were like, oh well, it's pints, whatever, that's no big deal. And in my head, I was like, well, that's 16 ounces, 64 ounces for 4 laps. And then when we got to the track 2 days later, we were like pouring it out into these cups, and I think we were talking to somebody on the track, and Chris was explaining that they were imperial pints, which is different from regular pints. And I was like, holy shit. And then Chris was like, it's actually like 7-ish beers. I'm like, wow, like this isn't like the beer mile at all. This is like doing a double beer mile, but it's only a mile.
Yeah.
But like, so like we started, and like the first beer, I just got a bad start on, but it tasted a lot better than I thought it would without the carbonation. I thought we used Budweiser, and I thought it kind of tasted like apple juice without the carbonation. And then we get to lap 2, and I was like feeling okay. I was like, this is definitely a lot more liquid than I thought it was going to be. Beer 2 was fine, and I like had a few like vomit burps for the second lap. Got to the third beer, and that's when I was like, this is significant. Like, I feel like I've already drank, I mean, basically almost 48 ounces. So like, it's almost a beer mile, and you still have to do it again. And that's where the wheels just fell off.
Yeah, you were struggling. I
was glad that you can see it in the video. One of the guys that is from around the area, he and I are like similar beer drinking speeds.
Similar to the beer mile.
So I was like, if he wasn't doing the race, I for sure would have just like dropped out and been a Sally. But I was glad that he was in it, because there was that promise of like, okay, well, maybe I can beat Football Ben, as he's known.
Yeah, you have someone to race. Yeah. It was like, I knew that you and Ben were having a bad one when I lapped you. Like, I shouldn't be lapping you in general, but like when I lapped you, and I was off on my 4th lap running when you were still on like your 3rd beer.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, they're not having
It's
a good
having a
race
bad
today.
time.
They're not having a good one. I think it played out exactly how I thought it would. Honestly, it was I had done one before, and so I was like 5:01 the first time I did it, and then this time I knew I was a little bit better running shape, so I figured I could get the record. I still thought, the only thing, I think everything went well. The chugs and everything went well. It was basically felt like I expected it to. The one thing that I was surprised that I couldn't do a little better was run a little faster. But again, I think it was because I was in much better shape this time. Like last time when I did 5:01 the first time, I was not in good shape at all. So I thought, I could run 20 seconds faster for a mile, and I probably could run 20 seconds faster for an outright mile. But just the how full I was it's so hard to know how that's going to affect you. And so I felt like I really didn't know what I was running for paces on the laps. I wasn't really paying attention, but like lap 3 and 4 were definitely like I slowed down and couldn't really tell. I guess I kind of could tell because I felt like I weighed an extra 100 pounds, but that's the main thing was just I think if I were to keep doing it, I think I could get better just in getting used to that feeling and being able to run faster with that feeling. But I don't really intend to do it. If someone breaks my record, sure, I'll do it again. But until someone breaks my record, I'm not going to do it again.
Taking off.
I'm done. Just the beer 2 mile. I'm not going to do it again until someone breaks the record. Not a chance.
Definitely no. It's obviously from what I know anyway of mixture of running and what I know from the Bearmile. It's obviously a really really fast time, and I couldn't in a million years imagine myself ever doing that over my running career, like even attempting a Bearmile, because no, that just sounds painful. And the fact that you were saying, Adam, it wasn't really your day. With running, it sometimes you're on, sometimes you're off, and sometimes you feel bad at the start and then you get into it. But with the Bearmile, it's inevitable that it's gonna start off the best and it's just gonna go downhill from there.
That's a great point. Yeah,
That
normal running, it's like you can have a second win, third win, like feel good on 3, but no, in the Bearmile, if you start off bad, you're just gonna get worse. There's no coming back from it, and that's good. Don't think about doing the Bearmile for a few years. You can worry about that, later on.
Definitely.
You don't need to think about it now, but I'm sure at some point it will come about with some running team that you're on, and you never know. You might find that you're a natural at it. You might be really good at it someday.
Yeah, maybe I might have to force you to whip out one more Chunder mile if I ever break your record.
That would be awesome. I would love to see you break my record. That would be
Chris out of
great.
retirement.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
No, that would be funny. But no, honestly, fair play to the boys for obviously Chris for setting a new world record, and Adam for just even doing it in the first place. As I mentioned, it's a really really hard thing to do. So
Adam.
Hey man, that's what I'm doing.
But no, fair play to the both of you. And I think that's gonna do it for this episode. I really do appreciate the both of you for coming on and taking the time out of your day to have a chat. I feel like it was really good. I felt like I was a bit like your podcast today, where it wasn't hugely focused on running and times and splits and training, but a bit more relaxed, talking about the podcast and talking about the Bearmile. So I do appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast.
Of course,
Yeah,
our
thanks so much
pleasure.
for having us.
Yeah, hopefully your listeners enjoyed the non-running talk or less running talk. Hopefully they enjoy
Definitely, I say they definitely will. And links to the Bearmile website, Instagram, and the podcast are all down in the description below if you want to pick up some of the swag. It is. I looked at the shop the other day. It's really looking stacked over there, and as well the podcast. It's I listen to it on all of my runs, so I really do recommend you go over and check it out. So again, I really do appreciate you coming on, taking the time out. I appreciate everyone at home watching or listening, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.